Welcome to this episode of MegaCities in the game CityState. This is going to be a communist dictatorship, and I'd like to show you around the city a little bit. The first thing you're going to see just by looking around is that the road system is as meager as possible. This is a planned economy with a planned city. So every tile in here has been specifically chosen either for aesthetic purposes or ergonomic purposes. So I've eliminated as many roads as possible. And you can see that there's still not a lot of traffic. Only in certain areas are there any traffic, and that's simply because I haven't got around to building monorails there yet. So I'm going to bring up the interface here. You can do this by pressing V on your keyboard to hide it and bring it back at your leisure. So there are some good things about this communist dictatorships, and there are some bad things. As you can see, my stability and my approval rating are quite low. That's because I'm constantly committing genocide against the people who live in my slums, which I have over here. I've got them walled off so they can't enter or leave and disrupt the activities of my everyday citizens. Looks like they're rioting right now, but that's all right. I just kind of ignore them and let them take out the slums. Since I started my city over here, the rioters pretty much only attack over here, which is why a lot of these buildings are empty, but that's okay. There are some good things about this city. There's a large natural preserve that I have over here. And this is because ultimately I'm going to increase my environmental score by implementing more and more monorails and such. I just haven't got around to it yet. I'm not too concerned about the environment. It's more important for me to have industrial growth. And this is a largely agrarian society, and there is an enormous amount of industry that's also going on here. Since these are still in their early developmental stages, it's going to be quite a while before my environment score goes up. So I'll show you the downtown area a little bit here. This is all pretty much newly implemented. I had to flatten the earth and destroy all the informal settlers that were here, and from the ashes rose up this village. So we've got our unicameral over here, which it's just the Senate, which I control. We've got my mansion over here surrounded by a moat. Over in this section, this is the business sector of the main downtown area, and the residential sector is over here where the mountains are. I've utilized pretty much every natural mountain I had on this map, which was very few, for ski resorts. And that's because you can't build a mountain, and you need to be able to have activities for tourists to engage in. So I'm going to bring up my demographics here. You'll see my freedom index is very low. There are pretty much no personal freedoms provided other than prostitution. I decided to allow that, keep people off my back a little bit. And then civil rights is also quite low. While there are certain activities that the government provides, for example, it provides universal basic income to even the poorest of residents, as well as housing benefits and college benefits. On the other end of that, there's no personal freedoms, and the tax rate is quite high. My population growth is sustainable simply because I allow so many immigrants in. Anyone is welcome to come into this country, and that's been able to maintain the status quo for a while. You can see here that I don't have any downward mobility because my middle and upper income demand is so high. However, the access to the middle and upper class for someone in the lower classes is nearly impossible. And that's been driven in through legislation. That's to make it so I have these even class levels. I want to have about 25% upper income, 25% middle, and then 40% would be low income. The rest of the 10% lives in my concentration camps over here. So that's the underbelly of the city, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I put policies in place to pretty much assure that. Over here, I do have a space program, but it's kind of like the Democratic Republic of North Korea's space program, where it's just more or less for show. It doesn't really do anything, and I'm not going to put money into it. And then over here, I have my military base, and I put that out in the sands, for training activities and such like that. We've got some refugee camps here as well. Not that we have too many refugees because my country doesn't accept them. The riots here are pretty much continuous. You could probably hear those going on in the background. Like I said, I don't really get myself involved with the common rabble and worry about their concerns. Over here we have our large fields, and these are ultimately going to become vertical farms. And eventually, once about half of them are vertical farms, I will destroy the rest of the fields that have not become that and will replace them with more infrastructure. So as you can see over here, I've already got one vertical farm developing. These take quite a long time in my kind of society because my lower income demand is so low. And ultimately, I'll change practices around to assure that it's going to be a little bit higher. One of the tricks I've done in the city is, as you can see, I've got beaches along every tile that isn't taken by a port on the sides of the map. That's to increase the amount of activities that I have to boost my tourism industry. If you look at the map here, I have 25,000 different activities available, so that'll make for a good tourism industry. I also have a lot of basic housing. So this is government housing over here. And as you can see, it sprawls quite a bit. And this is for all the people to live in who cannot afford to live in regular housing. And these are kind of interesting because every time you build one, you get 1,000 inhabitants that will immediately flock into them. It's not like residential housing where you have to build it and wait for people to come. They just show up because, it's a free house. So everyone's just going to run in the doors. And that's what actually started this city. So I started down here in the corner with just these buildings and built up the industries around them. And that spread and spread until it became this mega sprawling city. And when I no longer relied on cheap labor with a 80% tax rate, I dropped the tax rate down to something more reasonable and started building a private sector business. So over here, I've got what I call an airplane farm. There's, I guess you can call it an exploit in the game where the airplanes will increase your medium and high demand. Now, I think that that's done intentionally, but you can put in an enormous amount of airports and just raise your demand. So I'm at +9 higher income demand, +10 middle income, and only 1 for lower income because they really don't do a whole lot to affect your lower income. And that gives you some room to play with your policies to lower middle and upper demand and increase lower demand. So there are a couple of special things that you can build on your maps once you have them unlocked, including amusement parks, which I have one down over here somewhere. I'm not quite sure where I hit it. Yeah, there we go. So I've got one over there, and that's because I accidentally misplaced it there. You can only put that in once, and once it's there, you can't just delete it and make a new one, so that's kind of unfortunate. I don't really like dealing with arcologies too much. That's these little spires over here. The only reason I built these is because what they do is they give you a 66% employed to unemployed ratio. So they're pretty much self-sustainable. So I built a map with nothing but those before. My maximum population was well over 200 million. However, my unemployment rate was 33%. And that's because they are self-sustainable in the sense that 66% of people who live in them will also work in them, while 33% will be completely unemployed. So my current unemployment rate in this city is 3.4%. I try to keep it around 1% in this city just because I want to have every single person who can work be in the fields toiling. But typically 4% is a good unemployment rate to have. I've got my university over here where people are chosen through nepotism to attend. And let's see what else we got going on here. This is the main industrial sector. So this was built at the start of the game, and it takes a long time to develop. So eventually they'll all be +5s or stage 5 or 6s. And by that time, because they'll be more tech oriented rather than just industrial iron smelting complexes, my environment score will raise, and I'll finally have utopian quality of life. So when you're building a communist dictatorship, you don't just build one from the start. You can't just say, I'm going to be a communist dictatorship and then start choosing policies that way, because it's really not a viable economic system. So the way you would need to do this is, in my case, I built a free libertarian state, and over time, after it became more and more successful and it started to build up, I more aggressively changed policies to strip the people away of their freedoms, taking common sense things like, gun law approaches first, because people weren't going to be rioting in the streets if you take their guns in this game. And then ultimately stripping them of every freedom they have, to the point where we're in this hellish landscape that you see before you. So this is just one of the different societies you can build. It's one of the harder ones to accomplish because it takes a lot of time in order to um, lower your freedom score enough. Because what you need to do is, not only do you have to have a communist economy set up, which is hard to manage, but you also need to lower your freedom score. It is entirely possible you can have a communist anarchy if your freedom score was at about 98 and your economy was still based on communism. But I'm not sure if you could actually achieve that. I've never been able to build a communist anarchy, but all the other forms, you could have a libertarian anarchy, you can have a communist democracy, you can have a communist oligarchy. So there's a lot of different options, and I'm going to explore a couple of different kinds of societies in future videos. All right, thank you for watching, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to see more content on this channel. And I know we're all looking forward to CityState 2, so I will post updates as they come out.